So absolutely delighted to have Zim visit us today and talk to us a little bit about how she's managed to build an unconventional company. So Zim, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've got an impressive resume, which goes from being a biologist to various things and finally entrepreneurship. So tell us how that's all come about.
Okay, where do I start? Okay, so I was born and raised in Minnesota. I was one of those kids that loved to get lost. So I was always wandering around. My mom often tells me the story of how I let myself out of the apartment that we were staying at when I was, I think I was 1. It was the middle of the winter, and I walked around the parking lot until child services came to pick me up. And so she likes to tell me that story, and so I linked that to kind of to what I'm doing now. I'm kind of a wanderer at heart. After I left Minnesota, I was about 8 years old. I moved to North Carolina, and I got into biology my freshman, sophomore, junior year of college. And at the age of 19, I cloned a gene. I was one of those like nerdy kinds of kids. I was like crushing fruit flies and just doing really weird things. And so that led me to traveling around the States to talk about my research. I also teamed up with my best friend who did a lot of anti-tobacco work at the time, and we traveled around the country talking to young people about big tobacco and how to protect ourselves against them. And so after that, I did some travel. I went and I moved to DC. I moved to San Francisco to organize churches or pastors of those churches in the Fillmore district, which is the oldest Black neighborhood in San Francisco. And then I moved back to North Carolina for my senior year. I had 5 years of university. I stayed an extra year. And I started an organization to help open a civil rights museum. It was a museum that hadn't been open for, I think, 14 years. Come on in. Sorry, I definitely put you on the spot. I'm sorry. And so my senior year, this museum opened, and I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit different. Instead of traveling and living in San Francisco and DC, I wanted to try something international. So I applied for this program, and I got it, and I sold everything that I owned after I graduated college, and I moved to India. So I was in India for a little over a year. I learned Hindi, and I lived on a train for a portion of the year. So I was just doing all of these really interesting things. And I went to India with braids similar to this. And so as my diaspora folks know, at some point, the braids have to come out. So I took the braids out, and I didn't know what to do with my hair. The hair of a lot of Indians is very different from my own, and I didn't have anything to take care of it. So my hair started breaking, and I thought to myself, you know, I don't see any people who look like me. I don't see any travelers or any expats who I can talk to about what's happening with my hair. And so the idea for Travel Noir was born there. But I sat on it for 2 years. I traveled through Asia, spent all of my money, and ended up broke back home in Southern California at my mom's house. And so it's kind of, Travel Noir kind of started out of that. So it was a seed planted while I was living in India, and then I kind of came back to the US. My mom tried to get me into medicine, as again, all of my diasporic folks here, y'all know. So I'm Nigerian, and for my mom, it was you were either a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a failure. Like anything else, there was this like little box that you kind of had to fit in. And so when I came home after spending all my money traveling, my mom was like, oh yeah, so here's this nursing program, here's this doctor's program, here's this post-bac program. And after 6 months, I was like, all right, I love you, Mom, but I'm gonna move to San Francisco. So I had $300 in my bank account, and somebody offered a couch for me in San Francisco. on Treasure Island. I don't know if anybody's been to San Francisco, but there's this little island called Treasure Island between San Francisco and Oakland if you're to cross the Bay Bridge. So I lived there. I slept on a couch/bed for 6 months, and I worked 4 jobs, and I had this like really interesting, like I sold luxury sunglasses. I was a nanny, which was very short-lived, and I helped my friend start our company, and what else did I do? And I was an intern at a startup company. And being an intern at that startup company was what kind of fine-tuned this idea that I had for Travel Noir. So that is a very long answer to your question, but I hope it gives some background.
Absolutely, and it sounds like you chose the failure option when
Yeah.
it came to what the Nigerian parents wanted,
Yeah.
which is hence you founding Travel Noir. But tell us a little bit about what Travel Noir actually is, what
Yeah.
it does,
Yeah.
and who your target audience is.
Sure. So started Travel Noir in 2013, and this was after, not seeing travelers who look like me. If you go to any store, you pull any travel magazine off the stands, you'll never see somebody who looks like me. You'll never see a black girl in Italy or in, whatever. And what that meant for a lot of people was if they didn't see somebody who looked like them traveling in all these different places, they then thought that it might have been dangerous for them to travel, or that travel might not be for them, or that travel is only for the rich and famous, like Beyonce and Jay-Z, or whatever. And so I wanted to bring that down to earth. I mean, when I was living in India, I was flying on Air Asia for $8 to Malaysia from India. I mean, it was crazy. And so I wanted people to know this. And so Travel Noir started out as an editorial site. So we had about 100 writers who lived all over the globe who shared their love of travel and what it was like being a person of color while they traveled. I remember being in, I think I was in the Netherlands, and somebody asked me, they said, well, what's the difference between a black person traveling or black American traveling and a white American traveling? And I told them, I gave them a couple examples, but one that stood out was in China, like when I would go into a store and I'd ask for face wash, they'd give me skin whitening cream. Or a kid would come and try to rub off my skin thinking it was dirt and there was like white underneath. Or people who would constantly pull my hair. Or there were all of these different experiences that were very unique to a certain subset of people that nobody was talking about. So we started out as an editorial site, and then we grew from that to hosting live classes about how to get your boss to let you work from anywhere in the world, or how to get paid to travel. And we started building an audience that way. And one thing that I learned that we didn't make money for 18 months. So 18 months, we spent the time building an audience. And we just offered a lot of free things, a lot of free classes. And when we did end up selling a product, we sold out of it. And so we started as an editorial site, we started doing a lot of free things, and then we launched Travel Noir Experiences in July of 2015. Travel Noir Experiences, they're small group experiences, about 14 people. They're 14 strangers from anywhere in the world. They meet in one of our 7 destinations, and we take them for the ride of their life. It was inspired by my time in India. My time in India was awesome, but it was also like very challenging. Who in here has been to India? All right, so y'all know that India is not, some people used to tell me, oh, like India is like traveling to like any other Asian country, or it's like traveling to any other country, and it's not. It's like very difficult, it's very challenging, you either love it or you hate it. And I thought to myself, if India had not been so challenging, I would not have grown so much or been so transformed by it. And so I thought to myself, how can I compress that into 7 days where you challenge people enough that they don't hate you, right? Because it's a vacation, but you also build in moments of transformation. So on any one of our trips, you'll find days that challenge, days that lift you up, days that may make you upset. Like in Cape Town, for instance, we talk a lot about apartheid. In Joburg, we talk a lot about apartheid. And we go and talk to people, and we go into people's homes, and we cook with them. And so the idea behind those experiences is that they are an experience. It's like you're living just like a local, which isn't easy in a lot of places. And so we launched TN Experiences. We run about 60 trips a year across 5 continents. Each trip comes with a private photographer, and that's because I didn't want people to look through travel through their phone, right? I wanted people to be present, and I wanted people to really enjoy the moment and enjoy conversations and not try and gram everything or Snapchat everything or tweet things. And so those are the experiences. They're typically 7 days, 8 nights, 7 days, 6 nights. And then we launched Compass earlier this year, which is a platform that helps travelers travel better. So if you want to move abroad, if you want to travel solo, if you want to move your family abroad, we have resources that we deliver every single week to help you do that. So that's what Travel Noir is. I always tell everything in a story, just so you know. So sometimes the answers are very long, but bear with me. You'll remember them. That's right.
So that step off to, towards being an entrepreneur is obviously one that some people are a bit nervous about. How did you find it? Like, what emotions did you go through when you were making that decision and actually deciding that this was going to be for you?
Well, the decision was made for me. I didn't make the decision. 2 days before my birthday, actually, my boss sent me an email firing me. And this was, so it was 2 days before my birthday, and I think 2 weeks before like a vacation that I was supposed to take. And that kind of, it forced my hand, because I was planning on leaving a couple of months later, but it was such a blessing because had I left a couple months later on my own terms, I wouldn't have gotten like the severance. But since she fired me, I was able to keep that severance, which went into this pocket of mine to help me kind of live for the next 18 months that Travel Noir didn't make any money. And so entrepreneurship, I would say, is probably like the hardest thing I've ever done. Anybody who is an entrepreneur who has been will probably say the very same things. I mean, just a couple months ago, I was like, what if I just give it all up and just buy a little house in Italy with no internet, no electricity, and just look at the water. I'll be fine, I'll be quiet, I'll live a nice quiet existence. Every entrepreneur has talks like that with themselves. And it's a matter of really understanding your mission and what you are called to do in this world. And it's hard. It's not easy. I have a team of full-time folks of eight people, but you count all of our contractors in, and that brings it up to 30. And just managing you're holding these people's lives in your hand, and every move that you make, their livelihood depends on it. And that pressure of having to figure out whether or not you have this really great idea, but it's not financially feasible, but you want to do it. You can't do it because you have the livelihoods of these people in your hands, people who have families, people who are considering proposing to their significant others. You have all of these different things. And so it's been a challenge, but it's also pretty beautiful. I mean, you build something out of the dust, and it's, one of the things that I thought was really cool last year in January, we had a team of 4 people. And got a tweet one morning in January that we'd been named by Fast Company as one of the most innovative companies in the world. And it was kind of mind-blowing because we were such a small team, but it was kind of validating too that anybody with an idea that has a penchant towards execution can really do some good in the world. And so that's what I've learned about entrepreneurship. I mean, there's a lot that I've learned about entrepreneurship. I could talk about it all day. But it's really hard. And I tell people ask me what their advice is for wannabe entrepreneurs. And a lot of times I tell them not to do it. And I know that's really bad, but it really is hard. And when you think about entrepreneurs that are charismatic specifically, they have a higher rate of depression, right? And they have being a charismatic entrepreneur who who are you going to talk to when things go wrong, right? Like, if you have a significant other, perfect, but are there people around you that really understand the perils and the plight of being an entrepreneur? And I know it's hard to like put into words for people who aren't entrepreneurs, but sometimes it can get really challenging. But it's also beautiful. So there's a balance.
Great. So just to pick up on your point around, needing to have other people to talk to, who have your mentors been over your journey with Travel Noir?
Yeah. So I have a group of advisors. They all come from different walks of life. But I also have a group of entrepreneurs that I meet with maybe 4 or 5 times a year. These are entrepreneurs from all over the world, and we all come together to talk about issues and what we're going through. And one thing that I've learned is that no matter how much money you make, you're still messed up. Like, everybody still has problems. Everybody has problems. You think when you get into a room with somebody who has a $200 million company that they're just gonna be like relaxing and maxing, but it's just problems magnified on a different scale, on a different level. And so that's one thing that I've learned, is that your problems don't go away when you got money. They're still there, just in different ways. Yeah.
Cool. And congratulations on being named one of Forbes 30 under 30.
Thank you.
That's absolutely fantastic from last year. So apart from that particular highlight, what other highs have you had?
Other highs. I would say having a team of really cool people. It's always great when you're able to work with people that you get along with, and people who are just a lot of fun, who are grounded in the same mission that you're grounded in. I can take a month off and not have to worry about anything because they handle everything. And so I think that that's been a biggest blessing. Launching Compass this year has also been a big blessing. I'm trying to think. There have been so many highs, but I tell my team not to get caught up on all of them, right? And so while we do celebrate, what we've got going on, we are also still very rooted in the work that we have to do, because we have more people to reach, and we have more, we have more people that we want, more people whose lives we want to help transform. And so we do celebrate the wins, but then we go back and we dive into the work that we have to do. Cool. Yeah.
And you have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media at the moment. So what role has digital actually played in helping build your brand?
Huge. I mean, you talk about millennials today and how much our lives are kind of intertwined with social media. I remember first starting the Travel Noir Instagram account. It was so hard to find Black travelers. Like, I would sit and browse on Instagram for hours to find one photo, and we would post 12 photos a day. So if you can imagine, like, it was a lot of hard work. But over time, it got easier. People liked seeing themselves featured in different places, so that made it easier for people to kind of tag their photos. And so it's been such a great help. In fact, people, when they tell me they've heard of Travel Noir, the first place that they say that they've heard of Travel Noir is Instagram. And so we use Instagram as like the top of the funnel. And so a lot of times when we need somebody to do something, we have a call to action, we start on Instagram or we start an email, and we direct people where we want to go, which has been really cool. Yeah.
Great. And sort of back to more your travel and personal experiences, what's the craziest place you've ever visited?
The craziest place I've ever visited? Probably India. I will always say India for any crazy adventure. Craziest place I visited. So my boyfriend and I, he came to India while I was living there, and we took a bus, like a 4x4 up to Kashmir, which is the disputed territory of India and Pakistan. And it was so beautiful, though. It was so beautiful, but it was quite treacherous getting there. We had to sit in it wasn't the trunk, but it was like, if you imagine like a Jeep, and you have the chair, you have the driver's seat and the passenger seat, and then you have like another row of seats. We were in the back, like where there were no seats, just the floor. So we were just sitting in the back looking at the outside, and we rode on this this canyon with no fence. But it was just like, it was the craziest thing. It was the craziest adventure. People die on that road. We got stopped by, there were either cows or goats that were crossing, and it caused a whole traffic jam. And for those that have been to India, you know how cows do. They just do whatever they do, and everybody just stops. So, but it was cool, it was fun.
Great. I'm just going to open it up to the audience to see if anyone has got any questions for Zim. We've got a mic. So, Bami?
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zim. I love the way that you answer questions and stories.
Oh, thank you.
So I was just wondering, using what you know now, what would you have told yourself when you first decided to start Travel Noir?
That's a good question. Back then, I'd probably say have a closer relationship with God. And I think that, so when I first started Travel Noir, I had like a team, but it was because we didn't make any money, we couldn't afford to pay anybody. And I think that the way that I treated people back then, it wasn't bad. Like I wasn't yelling at people or kicking them or doing anything like that. But I think that had I had a closer and tighter relationship with God, I would have been much calmer. I would have been nicer to people. And so I think that's probably one of the big things, because I had a team fallout before we hired a new team. So if you can imagine running a company and then you lose your team and then you have to kind of start over. And then another thing that I would say would probably be, I don't know, like sometimes because we're not out there, like we're not hosting a lot of events, or we're not at every event, people kind of see us as standoffish or a little like secretive or whatever, and it's not the case. And I guess maybe it's just like the ethic or the ethics or the drive. We just love our work and we love doing good work, and sometimes we just get consumed in doing that good work, but not being afraid to like peek out of the curtain every once in a while and say what's up to folks. So yeah.
How did you find your team when you were starting off and you couldn't offer them any money?
So I think everybody for the most part has been really intrigued with this idea about like working from anywhere, or working for a travel company, or we have unlimited vacations and we don't have an office. And so obviously we couldn't pay people back then. So before we could pay people, I think people were just really attracted to the brand and the culture of the brand, and people wanted to be associated with what we were doing. So it wasn't difficult to find a team. I mean, it's always difficult to find like a quality team, but it wasn't challenging to find people who loved travel, because back then, not that there was a small subset of Black folks traveling, there were a ton, but we weren't all connected. And I think once people found that nexus, they kind of wanted to gravitate towards it. So some people were like old friends that I brought into this project, and some people, like we had a fellowship program, and the fellowship program, I taught you how to earn enough miles for a free vacation anywhere you wanted in the world. And a lot of people were like, oh, shoot, okay, like you're not paying me, but you're showing me how to travel for free, and that's like the next best thing.
First of all, your work on Instagram, amazing. So I'm one of the people who found it on Instagram.
Okay.
So I want to talk about building of culture, and that's previously used to work for a startup, and that's one of the biggest. I guess like starting, it's like pretty tough to do it. How did you go about sort of building culture, especially from Instagram, sort of getting the follower base? Because you've got lots of travelers that you sort of connected in there, and sort of, I guess you connected a group of travelers all over the world on Instagram. But I learned about other people's travels through that,
Yeah.
and also about Travel Noir. So how do you go about doing that and just sort of creating this community?
Yeah.
And then my second question was about the locations that you have already listed. How do you go about selecting those and sort of organizing the experiences? For one, I lived in Cape Town, and most experiences you see there is very touristy,
Yeah.
which is you don't learn about sort of the history and what's going on and the actual people who live there. So how did you go about also creating
Yeah.
that?
Okay. I have a very short-term memory, so I'm gonna try and remember both of them. Okay. So the first question is, how do we build culture? Culture is an extension of who we are as a team. So right when I had that team fall off, we had like 2 people that stayed. And so what I did was I said, all right, we gotta build a tighter culture. So we had a summer culture project, and we had, I think, a Friday all hands on deck for like 2 months. And we built out the entire culture. We built, all right, we want unlimited vacations. We want to be able to work from anywhere. I feel like now if I went back to my team and said, all right, y'all, we're gonna put an office in Chicago, they would like revolt. They really love being able to work from anywhere. We pay their cell phone bills. Like, we have all of these different things that we do to make it easy to work for Travel Noir. And so our culture was an extension of who we are. So everything is figure-outable is one of our tenets, and that just means that if I can't find, like, I can probably, if I flip this chair over, even if it doesn't have a name on it, I will find out who made this chair some way, somehow. And that's one of the cultures of the team. That's one of the tenets for our culture of the team, is that if we can't find a solution right away, we figure it out. And so every time we are considering candidates, we run them through a really interesting questionnaire. And I don't know if it's similar, like Google used to have something where it was like, so how many pennies are in the Empire State Building, or like something like that.
We got rid of those questions.
Yeah, so you got rid of those questions. We actually have that. We have the pennies question in one of our forms, because it goes back to that everything is figure-outable value. Instead of telling me what the number is for that particular, like how many pennies are in Empire State Building, you can ask me questions like, is there furniture in the lobby? How many people are there? Are the coins like from the UK? Are they American pennies? Like whatever. It allows us to see who people are without them telling us who they are, if that makes sense. So we also have, one of our values is be you, stay true. Everybody on our team is weird. Like the weirdest people that I know, and I'm also weird, but I want people who come into the Travel Noir team to also feel like they are welcoming their weird, and it's okay to be weird because we're all weird, okay? So that's we have kind of like, it's like a very, kind of like a familial vibe. It's kind of like almost how I would imagine Google was back in 98. And so that's the culture question. For the destination questions, sometimes we choose places based on where I've been or where some of my staff has been, and then we go there. We travel there, and I remember going to Cape Town. Who's been to Cape Town? All right, so we got folks that have been to Cape Town. So when I landed in Cape Town, I wanted to build an experience that I could relate to, which was a Black Cape Town experience. But when I landed in Cape Town, I stayed in Camps Bay. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Camps Bay, but it's like near the water, near the ocean. And the only people of color that I saw were the help. And I was like, So in order to build an experience that I can relate to, I have to find people who look like me. And so I was racking my brain trying to figure out how to build a Cape Town experience that was one that focused on culture, meeting people. And so I ended up figuring it out. And I remember we were at a point where we were trying to figure out whether to include Robben Island in the tour. And I talked to one of the guys who grew up in Langa, which is a township outside of Cape Town. And I said, I'm kind of torn between Robben Island and the District 6 Museum. And we landed on having those stories told by the people who live themselves in the township. And so we encourage people on their free day if they want to go to Robben Island to go there. But the guards in Robben Island don't even like giving the tours there because it reminds, these are former prisoners who spent their lives in this prison. And they're now forced, because they have to make a living, nobody will hire them, to retell the stories that were so painful for them. And so when building that experience, and all of our experiences really, we have to be very sensitive to all of these things. So people are paying for that sensitivity, if you will, right? So understanding the issues as they exist, people still go to Robben Island and they find out for themselves. Just like in Bali, we have an experience in Bali. People go to the elephant, they're not elephant farms, but they're like the elephant, not sanctuaries, but the elephant places. I don't know what they're called, but people go there and then they come back sad, right? Like they realize for themselves that this wasn't what I expected. But we get a lot of questions like, why don't y'all include like an elephant tour? Like, why don't you do X or why don't you do Y? And it's our job to be mindful and to be sensitive to how the locals really live their lives and how to create a space where we're only working with local vendors, we're building up economies and things like that. So a part of it, the mantra is travel to meet people, not see things. Right? So traveling to have conversations with people. Sometimes I know when I've traveled in the past, I would go to like monuments and like take pictures, but at the end of the day, what I really remembered about the trip were the people that I met and the homes that people invited me into and the coffee shops we sat at and talked and whatever. And so that's kind of the philosophy that we use to build those experiences. Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay. So I have questions around money. It's one question, but like multiple questions pop up. So like for one, how can like someone transition from employment to entrepreneurship? Because you see, when you're in employment, you're being paid at the end, at least on a specific date. So if you decide, you know what, I'm just gonna follow my dream, you need to be able to generate revenue. Because at the end of the day, you're a human being, you need a roof, you need to eat, you need clothes, you need everything. So, and you don't know how long that business is going to, how long the business will take to grow to be able to sustain the current standard of living that you have now. So like that's one thing that I think. And then again, the question of passion and also being, maybe that's not the right word to use, but realistic. So like I'm passionate about this idea, but at the end of the day, look, you got bills to pay, right?
Yeah.
So how do you manage? Because that's a conversation that you need to have with yourself,
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So how do you go about that? That's basically this whole money thing. And maybe the third question would be, how do you know this is the right time to stop? Maybe you have a nice idea, you're working on it, but the money's just not coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. I got a short. Okay. So first question was, I know what you were getting at. Okay, so when I was living in San Francisco, after I spent all my money traveling, I lived with my mom for 6 months. I moved to San Francisco and I had all those jobs. I had a $3 a day budget. So it was either I use that $3 for the bus or I use it to eat food. And with any startup, well, not any startup, but a lot of startups in San Francisco, they had free food, just like I'll do at Google. So I was able to kind of offset that. But $3 a day is not a lot, at all. And so that was the budget that I had for 6 months. So when you think about, and not every entrepreneur's journey is like that, but a good number of folks, when they leave their high-paying jobs, maintaining that standard of living, you have to reconcile that. Because if you're making 6 figures and you are trying to start a company that is making $0 and 0 cents, if you quit your job, then you're not. It's just not going. The numbers aren't going to shake out. So I remember after I got fired from my job, those checks stopped coming, but I think I saved maybe like $15,000 or something. But that was for the next 18 months that I had to live. Like $15,000 for 18 months, that's not a lot of money. And so I had to move out of my apartment. I was living in San Francisco, I moved out of my apartment, and I just traveled for 6 months. And so, there are lots of different ways that you have to reconcile what your passion is and your current standard of living and how comfortable you are. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Otherwise, at the first sign of hardship, you're just gonna quit and you're gonna go back to the high-paying job, which I think is it's a danger for a lot of people. They don't give their business or their idea enough time to really incubate. When I started Travel Noir while I still had my full-time job. So I started Travel Noir in 2013. I got my job in 2000. I started Travel Noir 2 months after I got my job. So all I needed was that security net. And I was like, okay, boom, this idea, let's get it going. I started Travel Noir and I didn't quit until, well, I got fired, so I was forced into entrepreneurship. But I ran with that idea while I had a steady paycheck. And I didn't like quit the job and then start Travel Noir. So I think that's also something to consider.
Hi, I'm also a huge Travel Noir fan. So you were talking about how one of the main things that gets you through the tough times is knowing what your mission is and hanging on to that. So I'm wondering, what is your mission, personally or for the company, and how did you come about pulling it together?
I looked back at my thread. So I took my mom to this like Oprah event like a couple years ago, and Oprah said, "What's your thread? What is the thing you were doing when you were a child that you can link to what you're doing now?" Right? So if you were, there's one story that she gave of a girl who loved to be organized, and she got a file cabinet for her 7th birthday and was the happiest person ever, and now she's like one of the best accountants in the country, or like something crazy like that. But what is the thing that you were doing when you were young that you stopped doing because people maybe said, oh, you can't make any money with this, or oh, like you can't do X? And tie that into the thing that you were the most passionate about, right? So for me, my mom told me the story when I was 1 and I left the house. I just let myself out and I was just walking around. I was probably throwing snowballs, like making snow angels, just doing as a 1-year-old. And so she was like, this was who you were. Like you were always wandering around trying to find the newest adventures. And so I often tell people I will go anywhere that's not war torn. You know, I want everybody to feel the same way, that anywhere that you travel to is your place to travel to, and you are welcome in that place. And so I think that the mission of Travel Noir came out of that. Like, you also belong here. And, you know, you don't, just because you don't see, I grew up in Minnesota. Minnesota is very white. I was like one of 3 people in my class. But, and so I grew up living a very different life. Like, I was this like one black girl with the exotic name. People were like, where are you from? So I shortened my name to Zim instead of Zim Ugochukwu, which is my full name. And then I moved to North Carolina, where I was crushing fruit flies and cloning jeans. Like, there were no other black girls in my school who were doing those things. And so I was always used to just being the other. And it took me time to figure out that that was also okay. And I wanted everybody to be able to feel okay with being other. And so I think the Travel Noir mission kind of came out of that.
Hi.
Hey.
You sound like the emails you send. Very long and very detailed. With all that you do and with the team that you manage, how do you find time for self?
Oh, so I block out, so a couple of things. So from like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., I have just nothing. So I usually do a lot of like praying or reading the Bible or like studying scripture or something like that. And then I take a 1 week off per month. And yeah, so I take 1 week off a month, and that usually doesn't include vacations. So I kind of mix those all in as well. I am one of the most restful people you'll meet. I have friends that I know that are really busy. I just have them block off a month in their calendar and send me an invite. So I know that if they change the dates, you know, if you like send somebody a confirmation, if you change the time or whatever, they get the notification. So if I get any notification from my friends that they moved their off times, I'm calling them and we're gonna have a serious discussion. And so I think that rest is so important, because who are you without rest? Like if y'all worked from January to December with no days off, y'all would be frizzle-frazzled, shaken, gray hair falling out, everything. And you wouldn't be of no use to anybody. And so I think that of the things that I've learned, you know, you have some entrepreneurs that are like, work till you die, like sleep, don't, like whatever, like don't sleep ever. And I'm like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I think that, you know, I've been very intentional about the time that I have to myself. Yeah.
Hey,
Hey.
Thanks for being here. First of all, I would like to know what's next for Travel Noir, and maybe are there any other industries with a lack of representation of people with color that you're looking into branching into maybe?
That's actually a good question. So for TN Experiences, more destinations. We're launching a new destination this summer. We're also looking at different segments. So I know that I've gone to a lot of conferences where people who are 50 plus, for instance, will be like, I want to go on your trips. Like everybody on those trips look like they're like my children. They could be my kids. And so, you know, things like that. There are always places that need more representation, I think. We've thought about interiors. I mean, travel kind of like, it intersects a lot of different industries in really interesting and unique ways. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of what's next. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
When you were talking, you talked about execution and how that's important for entrepreneurship. And when you answered the question, you talked also about taking time for yourself and, you know, rest. And I feel like most of us always have this illusion that we're gonna do what's important now and we're gonna rest later. Were you like this since day one, or did you have this moment of, you know, I think in 6 months when it's gonna take off, I'll rest then, or?
So I was actually working. So when I moved to San Francisco, I had the 4 jobs, right? So I was like a crazy person. And then when I got my full-time job as a producer in San Francisco and I started Travel Noir, I did those 2 jobs simultaneously. So I would work on Travel Noir from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., go to work from 9 to 5, and then work on Travel Noir from 5 to midnight, and then like do it all over again until I got myself sick. And like I wound up in a hospital, and then I realized like, I don't like you can't do that forever. Like hustle isn't sustainable forever. There's a period and a time and a place for it, but it can't be an everyday thing. And so then that was maybe in May. So then I was like, all right, so Travel Noir is doing pretty good. I've saved up enough money to like well, it wasn't enough. It was not, I mean, whatever, it's relative. But, you know, I was like, okay, so there has to be a time limit for like working these two jobs simultaneously, like they're both full-time jobs. And so, you know, July was my date that I was going to say, all right, I'm out of here. But my boss had other plans. So yeah, I think in the beginning, it was very much like work all the time, 24/7. But then you get sick and you can't work anymore. Like you can't work. Your body, if you don't give your body rest, your body's gonna force you to rest. And at the point where your body is forcing you to rest, you're like just no good to anybody. And so it's a lesson that I've had to learn time and time again in those periods of like working. My body is like, all right, not today. And you just have to listen because you can't do anything. So I think it's a constant lesson that as entrepreneurs you're taught all the time. Yeah.
And I'm gonna steal the last question, sorry. Do you think the idea is more important than the execution, or is the execution more important than the idea? Because
execution is more important than the idea. Because when I was living in India, I had a spreadsheet of like all these ideas that I had. 80% of them now exist today, right? Like I just had these ideas and I was like, oh, like I could be an idea machine. But if I don't execute on them, they're just there, you know, they just exist. And execution, like you can find ideas anywhere, but if you have an execution mindset, then any idea that comes your way, like you can make happen. Yeah. Execution.
Great. Well, on that note, I'll just say thank you so much for coming in. I think it's been an inspirational talk on so many different levels. You've taught us that, you know, we should follow our dreams first and foremost. You had this, you know, wanderlust biting at the age of 1, which is pretty amazing. But also the importance of rest, and that it's not easy to be an entrepreneur, that running your own business is not the nirvana that some people think it is. But if you really hold on and challenge yourself and create a culture within your own company, it could be something that your dreams are made of. So thank you again.
You are a good summary. Like, you have good summaries. I could never do that. I can't even remember what I talked about 5 minutes ago. That's cool. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank y'all.